Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the noontime edition of Business Series presented by PNC. I just want to thank you all for joining us. My name is Elaine Bonneau with the Downtown Inc. and YCEA, and it's hard to believe that this is our last Business Series workshop of the year for November. And what a year it has been. And just to remind you, we are not having a workshop in December, but we really hope that you're able to enjoy the holiday season. Although I know it's going to look a lot different this year, we just really want to extend all of you our best wishes for good health and hope that you can make great memories in new ways this holiday season. And look for the calendar for the 2021 Business Series coming soon. You can find that on our website, downtownyorkpa.com. So as you know, if you've tuned into the Business Series this year, in response to COVID, we've really adapted our topics to deliver the information and resources that you need as a business, and really that we all need as a community to navigate this pandemic. And we're just really grateful to have had your support and your input on these discussions and as they've developed, and also so very appreciative of PNC, our presenting sponsor, for making this forum for connection and education and continued growth possible. We really couldn't do it without PNC. So today's topic is very relevant, and I'm sure it's top of mind for most of us. I know it is for me. We'll be discussing economic trends for small businesses and Main Street communities, and we're going to have some expert insight from Tom Sullivan. He's the Vice President of Small Business Policy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I just want to tell you, Tom is very plain speaking. He's going to give you the information as it is, but also is very interested in hearing from you. What's on your mind? What are the things that you're thinking about as you're planning your business for next year and years going forward? Don't we all wish we had a crystal ball right now? I know we joke about that at Downtown Inc. and when I'm meeting with downtown businesses, if we only knew what the future held and what this pandemic will be going forward. Things are ever changing and so dynamic. But what Tom's going to give you is some information, some facts, some data that you can use in forecasting, that you can use. It's not a crystal ball, I wish we had it, but something to help you to plan for the future and understand on a national scale what's happening, but also what that means for Main Street communities like York, and specifically for our downtown York community, so we can create some strategies and some tactics so that we can, not just survive, as I say, but thrive, right? And have revitalization. So we're excited to have Tom as our presenter. We'll tell you more about his background in just a moment when I turn it over to Greg. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A. So we won't be able to have live dialogue because there are a lot of people on the workshop call today, but we're going to save about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to answer all your questions. And as I said, Tom is very much about having that dialogue and understanding what your questions are and answering those for you. So we'll make sure that we save plenty of time for that. Also, if you miss anything in this presentation or you think others could benefit from the information that you're hearing, the replay of this workshop will be available on our website, downtownyorkpa.com, later on this afternoon. So look for that. You'll receive a link via email, and you can review this replay or any other replays from workshops earlier this year. So with that, I'd like to now introduce you to Greg Grabowski. Greg is the Vice President and Branch and Business Center Manager at PNC. I'd like him to just say a few words on behalf of PNC to round out the year. Greg has been with PNC for 9 years and has served in various roles with PNC, really providing direct support and resources to business owners. He's definitely been a great resource to me and to our organization. He's also the husband of a small business owner, so he understands the business side of it very well. And he also has 3 little ones at home. So he understands the whole juggling act that people are doing with COVID and home and all of that. So with that, I would just like to turn it over to Greg. And Greg, thank you so much for joining us and for PNC sponsorship this year.
Elaine, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I think the interesting one that sort of you reminded me of, and it makes me chuckle, is the father of the 3 little ones. Because as my wife is trying to be a small business owner and a teacher and a mom and a husband to a person that works all the time, that it really hits home when someone says it out loud. So again, I appreciate that. Appreciate you pointing all of that out. But moreover, I really appreciate all that Downtown Inc. and YCEA has done for this business series as the years gone on. I remember the first one, right, back in January or February, we were all excited to have this all happen, and then everything happened, right? And so the way we were, you, not me, I had nothing to do with it, the way that you and your team were able to pivot and present such an effective and useful business series throughout the year is greatly appreciated by PNC. And we are absolutely honored and happy to have sponsored it all year and to continue to sponsor it. I echo your message, as this is the last one of the year, that I wish all of you a happy and healthy holiday season. I think the healthy part rings louder than it ever has this year. So again, happy and healthy holiday season on behalf of PNC. And so again, thank you for all you've done. Thank you for the people who are attending these, to stay regularly in the loop as to how we can help. And with that being said, I'd love to turn it over to the main show here. Tom Sullivan is the Vice President, as you said, of the Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Working with Chambers of Commerce and the U.S. Chambers nationwide network, Sullivan harnesses the views of small businesses and translates the grassroots power into federal policies that bolster free enterprise and reward entrepreneurship. He runs the U.S. Chamber Small Business Council, engaging those members on a regular basis to increase small business input and involvement in chamber activities. So, Tom, I'm honored and grateful that you were able to join today, and so I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you on so many different levels. Being a supporter of a small business owner who's your wife, and then certainly recognizing the way that Elaine did, that your household involves not only parenting and husband and wife, but also being teachers and caregivers is really, I think we're all being stretched to the limit during the pandemic. So not only thank you for the introduction, but thank you for what you do every day. And not the least of which, being a representative of a bank that has tremendously helped small business. I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm going to use 3 slides, and I want to make sure folks understand. The reason that I have 3 slides is not because 3 slides can capture everything that's going on with small business, but it's mainly to keep me on track. I have the best job at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce representing small business, and I'm fairly passionate about it. And that passion sometimes leads me down some rabbit holes, and having these 3 slides will hopefully keep me on track to try to get you all the best information possible. I'm going to refer to some data, and then I also have extensive notes about other data as it comes in on a regular basis. So one of the positives of the pandemic is that it has forced many organizations to really dig into data to figure out what's going on and, quite frankly, what is needed. And so we benefit from a policy perspective. We benefit from these data, and I'll try to use as much data as possible and also cite to where I'm getting these data from. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce represents about 3 million businesses across the United States. And that includes actually partnerships with organizations like yours, as well as between 1,200 and 2,000 local, state, and regional chambers of commerce, and about 500 business associations. Now, the majority of that membership is small. When we polled several years ago, when we polled our membership, looks like close to 90% of our membership has fewer than 100. I think about 75% of our membership have fewer than 10 employees. So kind of a good cross-section of what the business community writ large represents, but also the percentage of small business in the economy as well. I start in explaining some data and what's going on with small business with looking backwards. And, it's only 8 months ago. I think for many of us, it seems like 8 years ago, but really only 8 months ago, where Congress came together in an incredibly bipartisan way and passed 4 laws in 4 months, each one of which focusing on helping small business. So that does 2 things when I mention it. One is to give some optimism that Congress can actually work together to solve our nation's problems, but also to show how important small business has been when it comes to bipartisan solutions. Now, one of the first things Congress did was pass the CARES Act. Now, the CARES Act created a brand new lending program at the Small Business Administration. That lending program, called the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, ran from the first week of April all the way to August 8th. And we are pushing Congress to try to reopen that program because there's over $135 billion still left in that program. But really, in just a few months, the total number of loans, which as you can see here, there are over 5 million loans, that actually is more than SBA had lent in the, I'm looking at my notes, in the 67-year history of the Small Business Administration, done in 5 months. So really, really pretty amazing numbers. Also, giving a shout out to Greg and PNC and peers in the lending community. In the start of April, there were only about 1,200 banks who could loan SBA products, SBA loans. That was increased to, as you could see from these data, to over 5,400 banks getting approved by SBA to make these PPP loans. So I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. I think some of the unsung heroes from an economic perspective are the banks. Those are community banks, they're national banks with people like Greg and leaders in the local branches that did the hard work to get PPP loans out to small business. Now we'll get into some of the interesting data that has evolved over the last several months. Now we know certainly that small businesses have been devastated. We see data, I think the most recent data that I saw from Economic Innovation Group, EIG, was roughly 24% of small businesses have been permanently closed, which is mind-boggling in a very, very bad way. Now, when you dig into data, it is even more alarming to see how minority-owned businesses are faring in the pandemic. Because our poll done in conjunction with MetLife earlier this year shows that, let me get into some of my data here. When you asked small businesses back in July, are you likely to shut down? About 57% said yes. But when you ask minority business owners, 66% of those business owners said that they were likely going to shut down. Now that's bad enough, what makes it worse is when you ask those same cohort of businesses whether or not they were able to get a loan, 13% of minority-owned businesses couldn't get a loan. And compare that to just 8% of non-minority business owners answering that they couldn't get a loan. So not only are minority-owned businesses harder hit, they are actually less able to access capital that will help them survive. So that is a terrible, terrible situation. And we're trying to focus those efforts on, or that message to Congress that when you reopen PPP, it has got to be targeted at those businesses that need help the most. And what we've seen from data are that minority-owned businesses need help many times more than some others. Now, I hate to give such bad news without at least pairing it with some good news, because there are some good news coming out of the pandemic. And there is the expression of a K-shaped recovery. So when you think of a K, you've got one part of the K going upwards. You've got another part of the K going downwards. Now, there is a part of our economy, and there's a part of the small business economy that is doing pretty well. And really, it is doing well because of the power of entrepreneurship and free enterprise in this country. I mean, seeing small businesses pivot the way they have is truly, truly amazing. And that phenomenon is showing up in the data. So when you look at data from the National Federation of Independent Business, their latest COVID survey came out on October 29th. They say that about half of businesses are doing okay and don't need additional support from the federal government. So that would be that upper part of the K. However, you know, this is kind of a glass half full or a glass half empty. There are about 50% of businesses that will not survive from 3 to 6 months unless they receive additional financial assistance from the federal government. That is the downward part of that K in a K-shaped recovery. So when we're telling Congress, you have to pass a stimulus package that helps small business, we're insistent that it be targeted at that lower part of the K so that more businesses don't have to close. And again, that was from NFIB data released a week and a half ago. Now, when we get into some positive news, there are data coming from the Census Bureau that focus on applications for employer identification numbers, EINs, that are going to hire employees. So these are likely employer new businesses. And these data show actually 27% increase in applications for those EINs compared to the same week a year ago. Now, what makes this important is, one, to show the incredible resilience of the small business community, but two, it distinguishes what's going on right now from the recession. Because when you saw these same data during 2007 and 2009, it took almost 10 years for the numbers to show percentage increase year over year on new likely employer businesses. So I'm encouraged by that data, and that data is from EIG. Happy to answer some more questions about data after this quick 3-slide presentation. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and many organizations we work with, we are primarily an advocacy organization. We're lobbyists. We represent small businesses before elected officials in Washington, D.C. It's what we do best. We take the frustration, we take the pain on Main Street across the country, and we work with Congress to create the PPP loan program, to have better tax policies that create liquidity in businesses to get them through the pandemic. And during the pandemic, even before the second week of March, we were up in Congress, actually in person during those days, and helping them with the very difficult job of writing legislation that would help small businesses survive the pandemic. Now, one thing that we are not necessarily that great at is the how-to guides. I mean, we're principally an advocacy organization. And so pre-pandemic, you know, if a small business came to us and said, hey, you know, I need some help figuring out my taxes from last year. Say, well, you know, we could certainly work with the Ways and Means Committee in the House and the Finance Committee in the Senate, and we can help change tax law that helps business. But like actually doing taxes, well, we don't really know what to tell you. Well, what we heard at the beginning of the pandemic was an enormous call for information. And so like small businesses were pivoting, we actually pivoted too. We knew that it would become our responsibility to get educational materials to small businesses anywhere in the country to help them figure out all of this stuff. And it was extremely rewarding. I will never forget a weekend, I think it was a Sunday afternoon, where 18 of my colleagues who had never worked on small business issues before actually volunteered their time on a Sunday afternoon to learn about all these how-to guides so that they could give webinars like we're giving right now on how to get a PPP loan and how the employer retention tax credit works. All of these types of things that were intended to help our local chamber partners distribute information to businesses. Really a heartwarming kind of volunteer effort for everyone to kind of pitch in and become an education and how-to resource for small businesses. And this how-to resource really has evolved from how to get a PPP loan. And then when businesses started to reopen, we published reopening guides that contains information about what are the questions that you ask your employees before you allow them to come back. You know, do you have a temperature? Have you been exposed to anybody who's sick? All of those types of things. And certainly, above all, the insistence of washing your hands. You know, how soon do we forget that was at the end of every sentence 7 and 8 months ago, and perhaps now we should go back to having that at the end of every sentence. So be careful, be well, and don't forget to wash your hands. So maybe that should again be part of our lingo. So simple how-to guides certainly is something that we're proud of. We've been getting them out in English and Spanish. It's been a whole team effort. And we've shifted now into the how-to guides for PPP loan forgiveness. I'm sure Greg is familiar with how PNC is helping borrowers get their submittals into PNC Bank, and then PNC Bank gets that PPP forgiveness application to SBA. We try to provide information, helpful information on how to do that. Oops. I cannot end this presentation without mentioning that this may be the last business series, but we're only 10 days away from one of the most important days of the year, and that is Small Business Saturday. So thanks to electronic access, American Express has made it even easier this year to purchase at local businesses. If you want to patronize a shop without actually going out of your house, you can do that using the Small Business Saturday web presence of American Express. And of course, you can shop safely all across the country. And in Pennsylvania, it's no different. Remember to wear a mask, be respectful of social distancing, and follow the instructions of your local business owners. But please, 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 remember Small Business Saturday, and remember how important that consumer buying power is for small businesses who need that to make payroll and to survive past the pandemic. That's November 28th, in case anyone is as bad at math as I am and can't do the 10-day from now estimation. With that, I'll stop my short presentation and hopefully get into some Q's and A's. And I see one immediately from Jonathan, from John, who asks, what are local business owners able to do now to encourage lobby Congress to act on additional small business stimulus? John, thank you for that question. There are two things that a local business can do. First, contact your members of Congress. So that's your representative and your two senators, and say how important it is to pass a small business stimulus immediately. The second thing to do is, if your member of Congress or senator has taken positive steps towards this goal, write a quick thank you note. And if you have time, tell your story. The narratives that we hear from small business owners make a huge difference. I'll share one with you that really kind of ripped my guts out about 2 weeks ago. There's a small business owner on social media who explained that she sold her car for scrap to be able to afford a birthday gift for her daughter. That type of communication and the reality and the pain reflected in that actual example does more to convince Congress to act than anything else. I mean, I'll admit to the folks on this call is that there seems to be a lack of urgency with regards to passing a small business stimulus package. I have heard that a little bit of it is that, well, the stock market's doing okay, so why do we need to, as Congress, to act so quickly? And my response is that the stock market does not reflect the lower part of that K in a K-shaped recovery. A stock market does not reflect what's going on Main Street with small businesses. The stock market does not necessarily reflect that between 25% and 66% of small businesses may shutter for good. And right now, survey data show that close to half of the businesses need additional financial support to get through the next 3 to 6 months. Unless you, John, and local small business owners tell their stories, Congress doesn't necessarily feel the urgency to act. And so please take some time to do that. If you want to send me the notes, happy to receive them, then I'll pass them on to Congress. My email is tsullivan@uschamber.com. I'll post that in the chat very shortly, but that's probably the biggest thing that you can do. Another person says, with COVID cases rising again, it looks like the hospitality industry may be facing more tough months ahead. Yeah. What help do you have on the horizon for restaurants, travel, hotel, et cetera, business? So yes, and this is one of the reasons why we're pushing Congress to take action. Also, thank goodness a lot of local communities have also pitched in to help. U.S. Chamber of Commerce does have a Save Small Business initiative, and we try to direct folks to local resources that may be able to provide some assistance. I mean, the economic development leaders around the country are real heroes here. They are distributing some CARES Act funding through community organizations. It differs by state. Actually, it differs by county, but really amazing people doing amazing things. And my heart goes out to the hospitality industry because that person is absolutely right. They have been among the hardest hit during COVID. Zachary asks, you mentioned minority-owned businesses have more difficulty obtaining help. Why is that? Is it inaccessible issues, race issues within the system of loan distribution, or question mark? So Zachary, yes. There is a historical inequity about minority small businesses accessing capital. Now, what happens in the pandemic is that a phenomenon that has existed for a long time gets magnified. So I do not mean to say that the inequity to minority-owned businesses is specific to the pandemic. It's not. It has existed for a long time, and I'm working with a lot of wonderful folks around the country to try to really get at that inequity. But during the pandemic, those things that have been trends for a long time all of a sudden become magnified, and it's caught the attention of a lot of people. And it's part of my job is to make sure that that attention stays on the issue past the pandemic. So we are working with the Kellogg Foundation that show there are millions of dollars of untapped GDP just because of this inequity of access to capital. So when I say yes, there are racial issues within the system, within our capital markets system that need to be fixed. Long-term solution, but there are also short-term things that have to happen. And one of those short-term things is when Congress passes an additional stimulus for small business, really have to target some of that help towards underbanked or non-banked businesses, which mainly are minority-owned small businesses. Let's see, John asked another question. Are there forecast models available for 2021 to show a comparison between vaccine-ready economy versus economy without a vaccine? And if so, what are steps small businesses can do now to prepare for both scenarios? I suspect there are. I just haven't seen those type of models. I think the answer of what small businesses can do now is to really focus on keeping their employees and their customers safe. When you focus on those things immediately in front of you, making sure that your employees are safe, mask wearing, social distancing, washing hands, regular voluntary screening of employees, those things will withstand the vaccine ready and non-vaccine ready and are critically important. So there is some concern that when a vaccine starts hitting the streets, everyone will let their guards down, and small business owners certainly know better than that. And so it's that type of immediate preparation that will lead to longer term solutions. With that, I'll shut up and then hopefully have more time for a discussion.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was excellent information, and I'm happy to hear and discuss the questions that were put into the queue. If I can just add to some of the things that you said, Tom, as it relates to minority access to capital and why are minority businesses being affected disproportionately, all of the reasons that you stated, of course. And what we know from just looking at the research is that even businesses who did apply, minority-owned businesses, businesses owned by people of color, who did apply for funding, they went through non-traditional, not local bank sources, and they waited on average 10 days longer to receive that funding.
Yeah.
And knowing that most businesses have about, what in our research, about 27 days that they can operate and maintain their business without having any revenue come in, adding 10 days to that can be make or break for some businesses. So one of the things that we've done, as you mentioned, is looking at the county-wide resources that are available, working with Yoko Bloom, or I'm sorry, Yoko Restart Program, and that's part of the CARES Act funding for small businesses and nonprofits. If you applied for that and have not received information or notification on whether you have received the grant or your status, please reach out to us. You can go to downtownyorkpa.com. You can email info@downtownyorkpa.com, or you can go to the YCA website, yceapa.org, and we'll help you to find information so that you can find out what your status is. We did a tremendous amount of outreach to try to help businesses owned by people of color to, as you said, have access to more of those resources, whether it's preparing your P&L statement, whatever the need may be, just to kind of close that gap. And we also have just introduced the Yoko Bloom Restart or Startup Fund, which is for new businesses. Because if you started your business, let's say, right before the pandemic, you really didn't have a case for being able to apply for some of those funds. So the Yoko Bloom Restart Edition is really about helping new businesses. And Tom talked about that, what is this trend and what is it looking like for businesses who have recently started to get some of that access to capital, and also just grant funds to really get you launched successfully. So you can find that on the York County Economic Alliance website as well. Advocacy help. So as Tom said, you need to be in front of your elected officials, make your situation and the circumstance of how you represent the circumstances of smaller businesses broadly is really important. We can provide you with information, whether it's contact information, who you should be writing to, helping you craft that letter, templates. We have an advocacy and policy area of the York County Economic Alliance. And we are looking at issues on a countywide level, but also here locally in York City and in downtown. And so we can help you with the tools and resources and contacts so that you can do exactly what Tom suggested. Help for restaurants, travel, hospitality. It is really tough. And we know that those industries have been impacted more heavily because the shutdown and the restrictions apply to them in different ways than maybe some of the other industries. And so again, advocacy, policy, and we would encourage you, if you are in those industries, restaurant, travel, hospitality, that you look at advocacy on a local level, and reaching out to city council, looking at ordinances that maybe you would want to advocate for city council to reevaluate so that they're more business friendly for existing businesses or for new businesses to invest in York. And again, we can help you with all of that and certainly be a partner with you because, we succeed together. And so we want our city to be vital and revitalized and thriving. And so we can work together for that.
Elaine, we got a couple other questions. Can I?
Oh, good. Okay.
So one attendee actually had a really perceptive question about innovative ideas from small businesses across the country to adapt to COVID economy. So if we had 2 more hours, I'd go through just some incredible stories, but there's one consistent thread that goes throughout all of these stories. And I mean, haven't we all heard that expression, like the customer's always right? Now, if you're a retailer or in the food business, that can be the most annoying expression at the end of a long shift you've ever heard. But what we're finding from a common thread is when a small business owner really dives into some of what their customers want that are beyond the parameters of what they thought they were providing, all of a sudden these incredible pivoting innovations happen. I'll give you one example. that came up recently. There's a local restaurant that had reopened, partially reopened, to serve on the sidewalk. And this restaurant specialty was fresh fruits and vegetables. Like, people would come from all over the county to eat there because everything was fresh. And so one of the customers came up to the owner in the middle of the pandemic, and they're like, look, I love coming here, but I also like cooking at home. Can you sell me some of your produce and the meat that you sell? Because you always have the best, most fresh stuff. So the light bulb goes off in this entrepreneur's head. They now have a complete kind of grocery side business going on to capitalize on what their customers need. And they're selling, they're just doubling up on their orders of local produce and meat, and then selling it in a grocery store format. And it's worked out really well. Now, I'm not saying that this person's all of a sudden going to retire to the Bahamas next year, but certainly he is able to keep his employees on payroll and survive past the pandemic because he really focused in on what his customers wanted that was beyond what he had originally thought. And so I hear that kind of constant thread, or that similar thread that goes between all of these innovative ideas. I think one of the other ones was we had a liquor store and a craft brewery store that was shut down because they didn't have outside seating. And then there was a local drive-through restaurant that was actually doing pretty well because everyone's shifting to drive-through. So this local craft brew entrepreneur went over to the drive-through and said, hey, let's work together. You don't sell alcohol, I do. I think we can get an emergency permit and we'll just start allowing people to do the drive-through and order some of our local craft brew. And lo and behold, the businesses work together and they're doing great. And luckily no one's opening that craft brew on their way home and chugging down several beers before they pull into the driveway. It's like, that's not happening. But you do see that type of entrepreneurship happening all the time. And it's really, really encouraging. In the hospitality and restaurant industry, very, very difficult to do. My friend who runs a catering company out in Salt Lake, she's unfortunately gonna close her doors after Thanksgiving because she just can't sustain even as small as a 3-person payroll. She, her husband, and her son haven't been taking a salary for over 5 months. And so I don't want to give the impression that everybody can innovate out of everything. It's not that simple. We do have another question, Lane, about how many businesses have actually closed that said they were probably going to close. We don't have that data, primarily because you'd have to go back to the same business, which is called a panel study. Very expensive to do, very hard to do. The closest figure that I've seen that I think is accurate is 24%. EIG is able to extrapolate a number of different data to show that roughly 24% have permanently closed, like permanently closed. Then from NFIB data, we see about 50% kind of on that cliff. So if additional stimulus happens, probably won't fail. If somehow the light bulb goes on and they come up with a survival concept, probably survive. But you see 24% permanently shuttered. Roughly about 50% of the remaining are on that cliff.
Tom, that mirrors our data for York County. We're estimating anywhere from 18 to 26% will close permanently as a result of COVID. What we're seeing locally in downtown York, from about March to, I would say, October, were like 9 businesses that closed and can be attributed to COVID in that time period. But also in that time period, over 15 have opened. So you know, we want to be supportive, and you know, a variety of reasons. There are people who were nearing retirement, and COVID just, you know, accelerated that decision to retire or to move on to something else. But, you know, with that in mind, we want to make sure that for those businesses who are opening and are existing, as you said, we're giving them any and every resource that we have available to help them to not only survive, but thrive. So, yeah.
Yeah, Elaine, you know, just to put an exclamation point on the sensitivity of these wonderful small businesses who you and I get to work with all the time. You know, we're entering a critical point, not only because the coronavirus is spiking, but also because we're getting into some really sensitive seasonal types of businesses. I just heard from a flag manufacturer, a really cool company, a veteran-owned company that actually employs combat injured craftsmen to make American flags out of domestically sourced wood. It's called Flags of Valor. It's a beautiful.
Yes, I've heard of them.
Oh yeah, so
fantastic.
Yeah, so Joe Shamus and I were talking yesterday, and he said, "Look, like I'm scared because the next 3 weeks for him equate to 3 months in the normal retail cycle. They do more sales at the end of November and the beginning of December because of the holiday season than they do in the entire year. So if they aren't laser focused on employee safety, then and they have an outbreak, they're toast." And so it's more than just getting a loan, surviving, and then thriving, as you say. There are all these unique characteristics of what's going on. I mean, in talking with Joe, I got scared for him. And I know that he's taking every precaution, but gosh, how terrifying is that to think, like, if I have an outbreak, we're done. And so he's certainly in my prayers, along with hundreds of other small businesses. But that gets at a little bit of the toughness of getting data, because every small business, as you know, has a narrative and has a story. It's part of what makes Main Street so special.
Right, indeed. And you know, to your point about, you know, the importance of the PPE and taking those, you know, precautions, we did, and someone asked about surveying, we did a consumer sentiment survey about the middle of the summer. And, you know, not much has changed since then, but, you know, people were saying for them to come out and support your business, what they need to see, overwhelmingly, over 60% of the respondents, and we had about 2,000 respondents, said, I want to see, both in your communication and in practical application, that you are implementing cleanliness policy. Your employees are wearing masks, you're cleaning down counters continuously. You know, what are you doing, you know, in between tables, having hand sanitizer at the front door. Those things are very simple things, but they mean a difference between, one, as you said, what are your risk factors for, you know, exposing yourself and your employees, but also your customers feeling comfortable coming in and patronizing you and shopping with you. And so I just want to say, for the people who are on this call, Tom, because hopefully they are close enough that they can access this, we have PPE, masks and hand sanitizer that's been donated to us through a very generous donation from UniFirst. If you are in need, and that's not something that you have in your budget and you need mask or hand sanitizer, reach out to us. We're happy to provide that. But I do think that that's an important point. And that's not just us saying that, that's us asking customers, tell us what will make you comfortable coming back and shopping and patronizing with our businesses again. But I see there's another question here, Tom.
Oh yeah, so Elaine, this question is about, what about past COVID? You know, and I am really bullish on what a post-COVID small business economy looks like. But the reason is actually not very well reported. The reason, at least from my perspective, is as soon as schools reopen, you are going to see all of the small businesses that are at the top of that K, who want to grow, hire employees. Because what we're seeing is really kind of bizarre. What we're seeing is that those growth related companies that are doing pretty well, they can't find qualified employees. And then you read the newspaper and you say, well, wait a minute. Unemployment is really high. How can they not be finding employees? The answer is because we're staying at home and caring for folks who need help. And we're basically overseeing our children's educational needs. And you can't necessarily also have a full-time job at the same time. So I'm convinced as soon as schools reopen, unified across the board with a great number of certainty, which will come with a vaccine, you are going to see the small business economy skyrocket because you're always already seeing data that distinguishes this downturn from the recession. For the recession, small businesses were hit first and recovered last. This is very, very different. And the economy is waiting to take off, but it needs employees in order to fuel that growth. And so I think that that's going to happen when schools fully reopen, which will only happen with a broad distribution of vaccine.
Right, right. That's a great point. And as we started this conversation with everyone who's adapted their lifestyle for those reasons, you know, you're adapting a lot of things holistically about your lifestyle. But on the second part of that question, when the participant asked, will they face a drop off? And if so, how can they prepare for that? You know, I think about some of the things, and we've had this conversation with the Pennsylvania Downtown Center and other main streets about, you know, what adaptations have we made that we think are temporary and what is permanent? So I will say in terms of, and I may not be answering the question directly, and I'll allow you to address it also, but things that I think will be permanent, or let's start with temporary. So if you're a restaurant and you've adapted to offer curbside pickup and delivery, and so it is possible when things open up that you may see a drop off in that because maybe people won't necessarily be so inclined because they're not cooped up at home. So maybe they won't be so inclined to do curbside or carry out. I don't know, who's to say, again, that crystal ball, but there are some things as in terms of like our adaptive use of space and things that we're doing for restaurants, such as outdoor dining and taking advantage of space that has been underutilized and turning that into outdoor dining space. I don't think that's going to necessarily go away. I hope it doesn't. I hope we continue to think creatively about that. I also think that if you have not already looked at what your customer psychographics and what their inclination is for shopping and adapted to that in terms of online shopping and social media and other things, that I don't think it's going to change. You know, people will continue to want to have either in-person, online, or shopping. But anything else you want to say about that, Tom?
So, I mean,
temporary and
I think certainty has a lot to do with this. I mean, Americans are desperate for certainty, whether it's your kid's going to go to school and you're sure for more than a week, or you know what your tax filings are going to be with absolute certainty next April. Like, they're desperate for that type of certainty. I think one of the best things that can happen immediately after COVID is for the mayors of San Francisco and the mayor of New York City to say, we're making sure that all curbside restaurant dining can remain permit free for a 10-year minimum. We are going to look at this in 10 years. Because, I mean, when you think about it, there are certain cities in the United States that love to say they help small business, but they put all these rules and regulations that make it really difficult. Well, here we've seen actually the opposite, where mayors in New York and San Francisco have said, holy moly, we can't keep our economy going if we just ban all the restaurants from going out into the sidewalk. And now we have these wonderful communities that are safe because people are wearing masks and they're socially distancing. Why not give the certainty to that small business community that's going to be the case for at least a 10-year minimum? And then we'll assess whether or not you know, it's just pissing off all the neighbors and preventing people from riding bikes where they used to ride bikes. Like, give some certainty in what was relaxed to actually bring the economy up, to see if it can help sustain and improve, and, as in your words, Elaine, really thrive from a community perspective long term.
Yes, and we're hearing that echoed by our business owners as well. Exactly what you said. Can we have some continuity to some of these policies and changes, so that we can see, you know, what can it provide in terms of business opportunity going forward? We're coming to the close of our hour, Tom. I think Greg said that when we started. It's going to go very quickly, but there's one last question if you'd like to address about your position.
Oh, sure. So Zachary asked how I ended up being the head of small business policy for the U.S. Chamber. I have been incredibly blessed to serve President George W. Bush in really the same job that I have now. The difference being your tax dollars used to pay my salary, and now chamber membership pays my salary. But that was an opportunity to learn firsthand from government leaders all around the world about what works for small business, and most importantly, for me to travel to almost 50 states and hear from small business owners themselves, and what they need Washington to do and what they need Washington not to do. And that's what helped kind of create a path to be in one of the best advocacy organizations for the business community in this country, and get to work with folks like you, because you're actually where, you know, where the soles of the feet meet Main Street. That's where you are. And we are hugely grateful for your leadership in helping small businesses get through the pandemic. So thank you, Elaine.
And thank you, Tom. We're grateful for your leadership and your direction, and coming and giving us both, you know, the national perspective and what that means for us locally. We're going to put this information to good use, and I know we'll have more discussions about this with businesses one-on-one as we engage with them. I just want to say a couple things to close. Again, we're not going to have a December business series, so we wish all of you happy holidays and a very successful holiday business season. As Tom said, we're coming up on Small Business Saturday, which is November 28th. Yay. Nothing better you can do than to shop local, support your local, talk it up on all of your networks. And we are hosting a press conference to kick off our Small Business Saturday. We're doing that this Friday with the media, because we want to get all of you out in front of any potential customer and make that connection. Also, we are, as Tom mentioned, American Express Shop Small program. Downtown Inc. is a neighborhood champion. So if you want any of those marketing materials for your business, contact us. We got you. We'll get that out to you. The Yoko Bloom Restart Fund that I mentioned, or I'm sorry, I'm getting them confused. Yoko Strong Restart Fund. If you applied for a grant and you haven't heard anything about that, let us know. We'll help you get answers there. Also, something we recently launched is the Yoko Bloom Startup Edition for new businesses. That application deadline is November 30th. If you haven't been able to access any of this other funding and you're in need of funding for your new business, we can help you with that too. There's so many more resources. If you offer gift cards, you don't have a storefront, or your storefront can't accommodate a lot of people, we can put you on the gift card page on Downtown Inc.'s website and talk about it on social media. We have over 20,000 followers. So all of that, I'm trying to get all this information in 1 minute. The short story is we're here to help you. So Tom provided his contact information. Greg provided him his information. I hope you know by now how to reach me. Let us help you so that, as we said, our community can really navigate the nuances of this uncharted territory and be successful together. So anything else you want to say, Tom, before we wrap it up at the last minute?
Elaine, thank you for all you do. Wear masks and wash your hands.
Yes, washy. Stay safe, be well, everybody, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.